O último dado do PNAD, que é a pesquisa mais recente que a gente tem sobre os dados do Brasil, indicam que o número de crianças fora da escola tem aumentado, quer dizer, elas estão indo para o trabalho infantil em função da crise. Como é que você avalia esse momento brasileiro, no momento em que se fala tanto em educação, em crianças dentro da escola, como um valor humano importante para o crescimento do país?
Well, I'm sad to hear that news, and I'm surprised because I think Bolsa Familia is still functioning, and that's a condition to go to school. However, it's understandable that when the economy gets bad and you have households that are really on the subsistence level, that they are surviving by pulling their children out of school and sending them to work. I think we need to look for what's happened with boys, because boys are actually more vulnerable than girls to economic downturns because they earn more outside the household. And it's unfortunate because children who drop out at certain points in school, it's doubtful whether they'll come back to school or not. So the government might need to think about ways to keep those children in school, get the children in school, expanding Bolsa Familia. It's interesting too because my colleague Suzanne Duryea and I, we did research that was published in 2003. So we looked at older crises, and we found that actually during recessions and poor economic times, parents were more likely to send their children to school because there was not the opportunity to work. There weren't jobs for anybody, much less children. So the opportunity cost of sending your child to school was lower, so the children will go to school. But if the child labor is going up now because of the current crisis, that seems to indicate that things have changed a lot in Brazil since we published that work.
E na sua opinião, no momento que a criança se afasta da escola, se distancia, fica muito mais difícil para ela retornar?
Yes. Once children leave school, they're unlikely to return back to school. I think most of the research would show that.
A pesquisa mostra também, Mary, que os mais jovens são os mais afetados pelo desemprego, que também é crescente.
Right.
Como fazer uma geração acreditar num projeto de Brasil quando ele vai sendo colocado à margem das oportunidades?
Well, obviously that's very bad for those young people. When you are starting adult life and starting to work, those effects can be long-lasting. If you're leaving school and you're entering, or you're graduating from high school or college and entering into a bad job market, those effects can last for a very, very long time. So it's unfortunate that that's happening.
Outro dado que se observa com relação ao Brasil nesse momento é que algumas cidades elas estão diminuindo de tamanho, elas estão ficando menor porque as oportunidades são menores e, especialmente, de novo, os mais jovens estão migrando para outros lugares. Como é que você avalia essa tendência?
Is this happening in the Northeast or the South, or what region of Brazil are this phenomenon throughout the country?
Depende. Inclusive, isso acontece em cidades do estado de São Paulo, que é o estado mais rico do país.
I see. I experienced that. I've been doing some research in Paraná where they were telling me that was the case. When you see in the rural areas that the farms are becoming consolidated, the small farmers can't survive without becoming larger, so there's less. There are fewer farmers there, and then the young people don't have a place to go. I think part of it is that it's the young people's choice too, that they don't want to stay, they don't see opportunities for themselves on the farm or in the smaller cities, that they want to move to the larger cities to be able to find work, to be able to find schooling or what they're looking for. I think we see this happening in the United States as well, in some areas of the Midwest, where the smaller cities are disappearing and the young people are moving to the bigger cities. So I think that's normal. I mean, I don't think the government should really be trying to do much to keep people in the places where they are or where they grew up necessarily. Maybe those communities want to try to do things to stimulate the economy or to try to provide services. In the United States, people have tried to do things like have businesses that are based online that aren't really specific to places. But I think these things happen as economies develop. People tend to move to larger cities, and I'm not sure there's a lot that governments can do to try to counter that effect.
Você consegue enxergar desafios comuns entre Brasil e Estados Unidos, ou seja, que são duas sociedades com tantas diferenças, mas tem alguns desafios que são comuns?
Yes, I do think so. I think one issue that confronts both countries is the problem of inequality. I know that the United States inequality has been increasing. In Brazil, until recently, it was decreasing. Brazil started from a level that's much more unequal than the United States. So I think there's a lot that the countries can learn from each other in terms of policies. I know that Bolsa Familia is being tried and has been tried in cities in the United States as well as a way to confront inequality. I think another challenge that both countries face in common is the issues of racism and inequality across races. So in the United States, that's become very much in the news lately. And I know in Brazil it's an issue as well. So it's always interesting to compare and contrast how those issues are going in both of the countries.
Como é possível combinar qualidade e quantidade? Às vezes a gente vê qualidade na educação e quantidade também, mas essas duas coisas juntas, por que é tão difícil elas se encontrarem?
Well, as I agree with things that Martin Carnoy was just saying at the dialogue in the last session. We were in a session together. That he was saying that education is very human capital intensive, which is to say it requires a lot of time and it requires expertise. It's teachers interacting with students. So I think it is difficult he was saying there's no magic bullet, so having online education I think is not going to solve that type of problem. I think it's a matter of will, but I also think it's a matter of incentives too, and getting good teachers in the classroom and teachers that care about their students, both in the US and in Brazil, and creating incentives that attract those kinds of people to those professions, and providing resources to reward teachers who do their jobs very well. And the governments have to provide the resources to prioritize that and make that happen. So I think it's difficult. I think in some societies you can have classes that are very large by our standards, and teachers can run those classes and they function well. But in some cases that's very difficult to do. So unfortunately, I think it's very hard to kind of scale up education and say, okay, we can do this. There's certainly things that can be done more efficiently, but I think I agree that there's no magic bullet. But a lot of it has to do with the teacher and incentivizing the teacher and finding good teachers, people who really want to be good teachers and people who will do the job well.
Quanto que a política atrapalha o caminho da educação?
Sometimes incentive structure, it rewards things that are not related to how well children do. So for example, the tenure of the teacher, so how long they've been teaching, and your salary depends on how long you've been teaching. So if you've been teaching 20 years, you get more money, and if you've been teaching 2 years, you get less money, and that's how you make money. You just stay, you increase your salary, you just stay in your job for a longer period of time. But we know that some people are very, very good at teaching, and we should reward that. The problem is these things that make somebody a good teacher are hard to, they're not characteristics that we necessarily observe. We know it when we see it. We know that these teachers are having really good effects on their students. But it's not, the research shows it's not necessarily tied to the person's age, where they went to school, if they have higher degrees. That's another thing that we do in the United States, is we reward teachers for getting master's degrees and higher degrees. But the evidence shows that that doesn't really have an effect very much on student learning. So I think these are ways that policies do impede that. I think differently from Brazil, but in the United States, the resources that our public schools have are very closely tied to property taxes. So they're financed by property taxes. So you have communities of wealthy people who live in school districts, and a lot of the price of a house, when you buy a house in the United States, a lot of that is going to be capitalized in the quality of the school district that you are in. So that creates a lot of inequality. So people who live in rich neighborhoods, they have more resources for good public schools, and students who live in poor neighborhoods have fewer resources. And resources matter, although it's not just a matter of increasing the resources.
É possível dimensionar quanto que uma crise como o Brasil está passando por ela agora, quanto que isso pode atrasar o avanço da educação, ou seja, quanto que nós vamos ter que esperar para crescer no universo do aprendizado, que essa crise vai atravessar de novo o nosso caminho, como eu disse há pouco?
I think crises are times to really focus and think about what things are working and when things are not working. And so people maybe are more apt to make changes than when things are going well. I don't know how long it will take Brazil to get over this. Yeah. I guess one thing that is in Brazil's favor that we haven't talked about that's important is demographics. So Brazil is really in a very fortunate time demographically in that the population has been declining, or the fertility rates have fallen. So there are few, the ratio of children to people in working age is low. So that means there are more resources per child. So that's in Brazil's favor. That window of opportunity is going to be ending as the population ages. But that's one thing that's good. It makes us optimistic that Brazil will be able to maybe recover quickly from this. The people who are the people who will most be at risk will be the ones who were in vulnerable ages during the recession, that were taken out of school and didn't have an opportunity to go back. So they were out maybe a year or two. Then it becomes very hard to go back to school. You're older than your proper grade level. You've been used to working. It's hard to make that adjustment.
Agora precisa ter desejo da sociedade, uma determinação muito forte.
Yes.
Quando que o dinheiro não faz a diferença?
I guess maybe, for example, prioritizing something like spending a lot of money on computers and getting those in classrooms, as opposed to teacher training or getting good quality teachers in the classroom. That might be examples of things that might not work very well. But yes, or if you have schools where the parents are not very engaged, they're not able to judge the quality of the school, they don't perceive a value to education, then that's not going to matter either.
Então, mas vamos imaginar, para os familiares, para os pais exigirem uma boa escola, antes eles têm que saber o que é uma boa escola.
Exactly,
para eles desejarem essa boa escola para o filho.
Exactly. Yes, of course, the parents, that's been a problem in Brazil. If you have parents that are illiterate and they didn't go to school, it's very hard for them to evaluate what the quality of schooling is. But another reason to be optimistic about Brazil is that all these investments that have been happening in the last 10 or 15 years, 20 years in education, those children who were benefiting from that are now parents. And we know that increased education of parents has very beneficial effects for the schooling of their children. So as that increases rapidly, that leads to a positive feedback loop. So these parents are going to have more of an idea of what education's about. Part of it has to do with empowering Brazilian citizens as well. So the idea that, I have the right to complain when my school doesn't work well, or I have the right to complain when at the public school the teacher doesn't come to school or the principal's not engaged. So that's part of what's tied in with public education as well.
No Brasil, o desejo pela profissão de professor está em queda. Você tem alguma ideia de como isso ser retomado, ou seja, as pessoas quererem seguir a profissão de professor?
Well, it has to be valued. I have heard, or I've seen, I know that there were videos that have gone viral in Brazil of how students behave in a public school, that they have behaved, they have treated their teachers not very well. I don't know how common that is, but certainly when those kinds of videos go viral, that would not make teaching a very attractive occupation. But I would think something in Brazil that has a good salary, a regular salary with good working conditions. So maybe being able to work in a school that's close to where you live, having security when you're working, that you don't have to worry about your physical safety is probably very important as well. Having people value that. I think we have that problem in the United States as well, that people feel teaching is not a very valued career, although a teacher makes such a huge difference in students' lives. There was a very interesting study that was done in the United States that looked at the difference between having a good teacher and having a bad teacher when you kindergarten, first grade, primary school, and looking at later on the wages that this child earned as an adult, and found that it was a huge value, because that child would get go on to finish more education, get a much higher wage. I can't remember the exact amount, but but certainly the teachers are not earning, a good teacher is not earning what they are contributing to society just on the economic level in terms of increasing the wages of the students that they have.
Para você, como é o papel de ensinar?
I teach college students and I teach undergraduates and graduate students.
Sim.
And I really love it. I mean, I wouldn't have my job if I didn't really enjoy teaching. So it's wonderful to see students develop when they finally get a concept. I love seeing them continue in their careers. I'm teaching a class right now where I'm teaching students how to do research, and the way I'm doing that is they're researching the university. So it's great because aspects of university life in Illinois. So it's great because they get really into it. So they do more than what they're even supposed to do. So they said, I'm going to do, I did this interview, but I really need to find out this, so I'm going to interview somebody else. So when you can latch into a student's curiosity and they really care about finding the answer, you can get them to do a lot of work. And it's wonderful to see them develop intellectually, their capacities, seeing them develop as people as well.
Aqui nos Estados Unidos, como no Brasil, os jovens, quando terminam a graduação, terminam muito endividados. Aqui o número recente diz que a cada 10 jovens que terminam a universidade, 7 estão devedores com o banco e tudo.
Right.
Você vê isso como problema ou não?
I do. I'm at public university. I'm at the University of Illinois, and what we've seen in the last 20 years is our funding from the state. The state's commitment to the university has gone down. So what we've done is increased tuition. So the students have to take on more debt in order to graduate, and I think that does hamper a young person's life. I'm not in favor of having all university education be free like it is in Brazil, because the people who mainly benefit from the university tend to be from wealthier backgrounds, because these are the people that can compete to get into the university. On the other hand, with the middle class students, this is really becoming a significant burden, and it affects their lives in terms of the things that they study, or the jobs that they take, the things they can do later on in life. So I do think some of the levels of debt are quite high. I think students need to be counseled as well, and sometimes I wonder, in our consumer society, college students feel pressured to keep up with their peers. So they may be taking on debt, but also spending a lot of money that maybe they shouldn't be spending, or they should be careful about what they're doing. So we need to give them financial advice about how to handle that. I think it seems reasonable to take on some amount of debt. I did when I was a college student and a graduate student, but I was able to pay it off in a reasonable amount of time, and it didn't affect my choices in life very much. It is true that over time, the availability of low interest loans has been decreasing, or hasn't grown as much as the demand for it. So yeah, so it's worrisome. When I started teaching at Illinois, I would know students who were not getting support from their parents, but were able to work and put themselves through the university without being in too much debt. Nowadays, I don't think it's even possible to do it. I don't think a student could put themselves through, even being able to borrow as much money as they could to do that.
Muito obrigada.
Thank you. Obrigada.